This review is to show you our favorite grammar program in terms of just doing some daily practice and trying to make sure we know our parts of speech and things like that. So we actually do classical conversations, and so we use the essentials for the English language to learn about the parts of speech, to learn about sentence structure and the different parts of speech and where they can be used in sentences and how they're used and all those things. But this is what we used for our everyday practice to just get some extra practice on making sure that we're identifying the different parts of speech in the sentence. And so this is the level 2. So that is town mouse and country mouse. And this is the newer version. So you're going to see these for sale. Be sure that you are getting the 2022 version because they just revamped these a few years ago. And the original version would have the sentence in its basic form, unedited, and you would see multiple sentences on the page, and then your teacher guide would tell you the answers for these, and the idea is that the kid is keeping their own separate notebook where they're writing out all the corrected sentences. But what I really like about this newer version is that there is one part or one exercise. It's not always one sentence, it could be 2 sentences, but there's one exercise per page, enough room for your student to write out, and then it tells them exactly what they're looking for. So this is the kind of thing they can do independently, and that indeed is how we use it. So let me go to this page in the teacher's manual. We are almost done with level 2. We've actually been using Fix-It Grammar since level 1, which was Nose Tree, and that was back in the old version. And then we had started the second book, which I think was Robin Hood originally. And then when the new books came out, I made the jump and switched over to these books and stayed with level 2 because they, I think, were a little bit harder on the levels coming into the newer versions than they were on the originals. So this is what it looks like on the teacher version of the same page that my student has. So it tells them that they're going to read the sentence or 2. There's always a word that is in bold, and this is meant to be kind of like a vocabulary word. So if they don't know what that means, you have a definition up here. I think even in the book, they tell you to keep a separate vocabulary journal with all the words in bold and what they mean. But I find that my kids had not really had any words that they didn't know. So we haven't worried about doing that. But what I do is I go and write this on the board, and I give my kids probably about 5 minutes to go ahead and work through all the different parts of speech. So they'll look here and they'll see, okay, I'm going to look for 3 articles. So they're looking for article adjectives, and that's usually going to be the, oh, in this case it's a. And so they're looking for these, and then they write AR for article. And so they're not calling them adjectives at this point, they're just calling them articles. So they're labeling AR for article, and they're doing that where the different articles are. Same for nouns, they mark it with an N. If you forget what you abbreviate it with, they put it in parentheses right here. So they go through and they put an N. They're not identifying what type of noun it is, what its place is in the sentence, but they're at least identifying this is a noun. Same with a pronoun, they're just finding a general subject pronoun, and so they're locating those. There's 7 adjectives on this one, so they'll go through for tall, in front of tail. And so they have to go through and find the adjectives. Coordinating conjunctions, which are pretty easy. We do a lot of that in CC. Prepositional phrases can be a little bit harder. You can see on my instructor guide, they have that underlined. And what I do when I write this on the board is I actually circle the preposition and then underline the whole prepositional phrase so that they can start to get used to what is a preposition and they can start to identify those in a sentence. Subject verb pairs. So we have 2 different clauses, and so you're finding both subject verb pairs of both clauses. And then openers, which if you do the IEW programs, you know how they have openers for your writing. So you have a subject opener, which is 1, you have the ly adverb opener, and so on and so on. So if you're using this with the writing program, it all fits together. And I think it does a really good job of fitting together with the classical conversations curriculum as well. And then they have some items over here for like capitals, commas, in marks, and any homophones that they would find in here. So I have them go through independently, work on this, write out their whole thing, and then we go together And I call on them to say, okay, tell me the 3 articles. And then one kid answers and tells me the 3 articles. My 2 daughters are only a grade difference in their grades. And so we work on this together and we work on the same one. I don't think it's a big enough difference that I put one in one book and one in the other. So they're able to both kind of work on this together. So we work through this on the board, and I relabel and I circle everything, and I do my underlines for where we're going to capitalize, and all of those little details I put on the board so that they can see it, and I can make sure that their write-up is going to match what ultimately is the correct write-up. And then you also have some different explanations on here. So sometimes there'll be something like, and he needed to love, or something where they have like an infinitive. Well, they're not necessarily going to label love as a noun or a verb, but you might have a student that says, well, wouldn't that be a verb, or wouldn't that be a noun? And it's just that not all items in the sentence necessarily get identified because they haven't necessarily learned those parts of speech or how they fit into a sentence. So we have gone through articles, nouns, pronouns, adjectives, articles really an adjective, conjunction, prepositional phrases, but we haven't talked about interjections. Trying to think if there's anything else. We have talked about adverbs. So pretty much interjections might be the only thing we haven't talked about, but how something functions within the sentence, we haven't necessarily gone through all those little details, but you do more of that depending on the different levels. So let me show you what the scope and sequence is for this book. You can always go to the IEW website and you can see what the scope and sequence is if you're wondering what to start your kiddos in. So we started with book 1. I could not find book 1. But we started with book 1 for Fix-It Grammar, which is Nose Tree. And that literally is going to have them go through and label what's a noun. And then they'll do nouns. And then it'll say, and what's a verb? So then maybe after a week or something, you're adding on a verb and you're trying to find a verb. This is the scope and sequence for level 2, which is what we are just about to finish on, which is Robin Hood. And you can see how you're not just identifying noun, but you're getting specific nouns, like the noun of direct address, subject noun versus plural nouns. Same with your verbs. So you're going through action, linking, helping. And so I would imagine as we go into further levels, same with adjectives, article, adjective, possessive, or after a linking verb. And so as you go to the different levels, let me pull open the scope for level 3. We're still covering some of the same things for nouns. It looks like for pronoun, though, we are talking about 5 different types of pronouns. So it's going through different pronouns. Verb, that's still kind of staying the same. And then adjective, looks like we're going through different adjectives. So like if your kid's in CC, they're already going through and saying, is it a linking, a helping, intransitive or transitive? I mean, they're going through a lot of details. So this might seem almost a little bit easier, but why not have some great practice where they get to identify those parts of speech, they can really solidify it in their head. And then when they go to do diagramming in something like classical conversations, it's just so much easier because they already are very solid on their parts of speech. So this is also book 3. Here's more on the scope and sequence. So this is book 3, level 3, which is Robin Hood. And my guess is the first lesson will start a little easier. Oh, that's right. So there's 30 weeks in the book, and they go for 4 days a week. But you have a first day where you're getting a general lesson. So on this one, they're reminding you what a noun is, what a compound noun is, article, adjectives, some pronoun, prepositions. So this is kind of a review. On the earlier levels, they're not going to throw this much at them in one lesson. They might just talk about noun. And then in another week, they'll talk about pronouns. But because this is review, the kids should know all this at this point. And then on this page, they're not marking anything new that they haven't already learned about. But you can see it's kind of a simple sentence. There's not a whole lot that they're having to mark. And then as we go through, this is week 20, so this is further than halfway point. You can see how much they're starting to do. Oh, and trying to identify the clauses and the adverb clauses and things like that, that kind of stuff gets a little bit trickier and a little bit harder for the kids. So they'll start doing that where they're trying to find adverb clauses, main clauses, things like that, and they're going to add to it, and they'll have to identify those parts of the sentences. So I hope this was useful in seeing how this actually lays out and works. I highly recommend, if you are going to buy this, get a newer version from IEW. Don't buy an older version that is the pre-2022, because the updates they made really do make a difference. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Thanks so much.